Many Christians believe that going to church on Sundays, saying a few prayers and believing in God in their own way is enough to feel safe. But today I will share with you one of the most shocking near-death experiences ever recorded, a true testimony, one of the most well-known in the world, that has brought millions to tears, a vision that has shaken even theologians, pastors, and end-time scholars, because what was seen wasn't heaven, it was hell. And it wasn't full of atheists. It wasn't full of witches. It was full of Christians who knew the scriptures, who always went to church and prayed, but had made a subtle mistake, one that over time had become almost normal, accepted, even justified. Today, I invite you to listen carefully, because this isn't a story meant to scare. It's a cry to awaken, a chance to examine your heart, and maybe to decide to change your life before it's too late. Before we begin, I ask for a small gesture that makes a big difference. Type amen in the comments and leave a like on the video. This helps us bring testimonies like this to more hearts every day and to walk together as Christians who truly follow the word of the Lord. My name is Michael Donovan, and if you had met me until a few years ago, you would have thought I was a man. In order, I worked as an analyst for one of the largest financial companies in the Midwest, well-pressed jacket, sober tie firm, handshake. I spoke little about myself, but I never missed a prayer meeting. I could quote the Psalms with the precision of a surgeon, and I regularly donated to the church orphanage and was out of tune like a missing chord in a perfect symphony. It wasn't the first time God had shaken me. There had been another moment. I still remember it as if it were yesterday, even though Even though almost 20 years had passed. I was 19 and fighting a raging fever to the point that my body trembled as if in an earthquake. That night, while my mother bathed my forehead with a damp towel, I saw something. Not with my eyes, but with my spirit. I was above a city I didn't recognize, suspended in midair, and everything was gray. There was no sun or stars, only fog. Then two enormous towers emerged from the mist, and within seconds collapsed one after the other, as if an invisible giant had struck them in the heart. Invisible giant had struck them in the chowdit. Names, others prayed, others fell and did not get up. A wind full of dust hit my face, and then darkness. I woke up trembling. I told everything to the pastor of my church, who replied with an embarrassed grimace, "Michael, it must have been the fever." Leave these 10 days later, I saw the same scene on the news, September 11th, 2001, New York, the Twin Towers. My mother screamed in front of the screen the exact scenario I had seen, down to the detail of the smoke that enveloped everything like a blanket of death. But I also didn't become the man I should have been. Instead, I put myself off in silence. I continued to live well, to work. Hard to be a good Christian. But I stopped listening to that inner voice, slowly extinguishing it as one suffocates a candle with their fingers. I convinced myself that it was enough to pray, participate, appear until that day, January 15th, 2019. I had just finished a tense meeting. My boss had accused me of making a mistake in a projection on the bond market. It wasn't true, but instead of defending myself, I remained silent. I swallowed the anger like poison. That evening, I had to go to the pharmacy. My blood pressure had dropped in recent days. Nothing serious, they said. Work stress, nothing more. I entered the store with a weight on my chest that I couldn't explain. The fluorescent light seemed like pins in my eyes. Every word of the people around me was white noise. Then the emptiness, my legs giving way, a distant voice. He's collapsing. A hand that vainly seeks a shelf, then blackness, but not the blackness of sleep. It was a blackness that had substance density, a silence that screamed, and there I understood I was dying. There was no panic. There was awareness I was still me, but without a body. As if I were made only of thought, memory, and truth, I no longer had anything to hide behind. Neither titles, nor careers, nor memorized verses, only my soul and a call that rang again loud like the one in 2001. Only this time, there was no time to ignore it. I can't say how long I remained suspended in that darkness. It wasn't an absence, as if the night had eyes and memory, as if it knew me better than I knew myself. There was no sound yet. The silence buzzed like a submerged drum. I had no body, yet I perceived everything. My breath was gone, but my consciousness had ignited as never before. Then something changed. Not a voice, a wordless whisper like wind caressing the mind, and the darkness began to break, not suddenly, but slowly like a cracking glass. A crack of light opened before me, and I was drawn in. I found myself in a place that no language can accurately describe. It looked like a garden, yes, but not like the ones cultivated on earth. It was a garden broken soulless. The trees were twisted as if they had suffered too much. The branches bent towards the ground like hands in eternal prayer. The ground beneath my feet was dry but not dead. It breathed, and it breathed pain. I walked barefoot but felt no pain, only regret not mine, of others of millions. It was as if every grain of soil told unsaid stories, unmade choices, unheard prayers. Every leaf whispered names, every stone carried memory. That garden was the echo of lost opportunities. In the center, I saw a fountain, but instead of water, sand, fine, golden sand, falling from an invisible hole and disappearing into nothingness. Each grain seemed like a second, a possibility. Each falling second said, "Too late." I approached. When I placed my hand on the edge of the basin, a wave of images overwhelmed me. Not symbolic visions, real scenes, memories, not mine, of others. A woman knelt, was full of hatred for her sister-in-law. A pastor shook the hand of a newly baptized man. A pastor shook the hand of a newly baptized man. But in his heart, he was thinking about to grow his ministerial image. A young man read the scriptures every morning, but he did it to feel superior to his friends who had stopped going to church, all religious, none redeemed. And then I heard the voice, not as sound as identity. It was Jesus. There was no doubt. He doesn't present himself with titles or miracles. He makes himself known by what emanates from him. Truth that tears love, that burns justice, that embraces Michael. He said, I turned around. I didn't see him, but I felt him all around me, as if the very air had taken his form. Before showing you what awaits you, you had to see this place. This is the garden where the seeds that never sprouted mature. It is the point where intentions not transformed into obedience wither. What place is this? Lord, I asked, not with my lips, but with my heart. It is the anteroom. Here arrive the hearts that have known my voice, but have silenced it. Here are gathered the promises, never kept the prayers said out of fear, the conversions that have never given birth to humility. Every word was like a sword that pierced my justifications. And within me something broke, because for the first time I saw, who are these, I asked. Those who called me Lord, but never let me reign. The roots of the trees moved slightly, as if trembling under the weight of a revelation, and I understood that this garden was not hell, but neither was it heaven. It was the truth before judgment. The moment when the soul is forced to see itself without filters, then the light opened and the garden vanished like mist in the sun. I felt a force dragging me, and the vision changed, but not my conscience. Now I knew true hell begins when you realize your faith was just theater. The garden disappeared as if it had only been a curtain, and behind it opened a world that no human heart can contain without breaking. I was no longer among broken roots or waterless fountains, but on a ridge as thin as a border between life and damnation. Below me, an enormous valley stretched into infinity. And what I saw I will never forget, not even in 1,000 lives. The ground was black, not like night, but like burnt flesh. Everywhere cracks from which a fire rose that emitted no light but torment. The air was thick as pitch, and yet I breathed, or rather, I felt the breath of others, millions of souls, some motionless others in a continuous, desperate movement, as if looking for a way out of a place that had no doors. There faces my God, the faces. Some of them I knew. The first was Pastor Reed. He had still remembered, he told me that knowing God was more important than studying him. When he told me that knowing God was more important than studying him. Yet there, immersed in the flames, he shouted, verses that dissolved into the air like sand. He had lost his voice from so much pleading, and no one was listening to him. Then I saw Janet, the choir leader. She had a talent that moved the congregation every Sunday, but now her hands were clenched in tight fists as if still holding microphones. Her lips moved, but no sound came out, only despair. She had sung of freedom while living as a prisoner of contempt for those who were not as spiritual as her. Why? I asked, my heart threatening to break. They were yours, Lord, they served you. Jesus' voice answered me deep as an ancient drum. They served me, yes, but they did not belong to me. They served religion, prestige, their own image. They used my name as a shield against humility. They spoke of grace, but they built walls with lie I had lived in. And as I walked among those souls, I saw the most terrible scene of all. A man dressed as a preacher, but which robe was still recognizable, even though burned and torn. I preached distinguished him where the words sound doctrine. I led souls to you. You led souls. You led souls to the worship of yourself. Jesus' voice replied, you used the truth to exalt yourself. You defended doctrine, but you never loved your neighbor. Every sermon of yours was a wall, not a bridge I was forced to watch to feel every crumb of despair. Those souls were not there for external sins, as the world defines evil. They were there for something more subtle, more treacherous, the illusion of being righteous. They had not blasphemed, stolen, killed. They had simply believed they were already saved without ever letting salvation. I served at the homeless shelter. A man cried out, I brought food to the poor. I served at the homeless shelter. But his hands were clenched in fists, his teeth gritted not in pain but in anger. But you did it to feel better about yourself. The Lord's voice whispered, not out of love, you judged those who didn't do as you did, and you thought that doing was enough to be. I walked on. Each step was a condemnation for myself, each face a fragment of a mirror. I saw myself in those gestures, in those thoughts, in those prayers, made more to quiet my conscience than to touch God. Then I saw something that made me falter myself, not in the valley, but above, still alive, standing during a worship service some years before, hands raised, eyes closed, but inside judgmental thoughts, I had observed a man in the front row with a dirty coat and had thought, what is someone like him doing here? I was there in my body, but there was no love-only form. I slumped down even without a body, my spirit bent like glass in the fire, and Jesus spoke again. The cemetery of the religious is full of those who believe that faith was a role, a mask, a habit, but I do not look at hands, I look at the heart, and in that moment, I understood. Hell is the place where every illusion falls away. I don't know how much time passed between one scene and another. In the realm where I was, time was like smoke. You saw it move, but you couldn't grasp it. When the valley of fire and the religious dissolved before me, there was no transition. I was simply transported as by a greater will that knew exactly where and what I needed to see. I found myself in a strangely silent place. There were no flames, no screams, only faces. Hundreds, maybe thousands, they floated in space, motionless like portraits hanging on an invisible wall. There were no bodies, only faces, but those faces conveyed a pain that pierced the skin of the soul. It was the pain of awareness. Jesus was with me. I didn't see him, but I felt him behind me. His voice didn't reach my ears. It went directly into my spirit. These are the hearts that convince themselves they didn't need me. The first face that came close to me was that of an elderly woman. She had large, intelligent, deep eyes, but full of contempt, as if she still judged. Even from there, Jesus said she led prayer groups for 30 years. She knew the scriptures better than many pastors, but she never forgave her sister for an offense that dated back 40 years. Every time she prayed, she did so with a closed heart, and she believed that saying, I forgive, was enough to be clean, while inside she harbored resentment like poisoned honey. The face moved away and another appeared. A young man, probably a worship leader. I recognized him. He had appeared in some conference I had watched on YouTube. He had talent, charisma, and yet his eyes now were empty, not sad empty, as if his heart had lived in a closed room without windows. He in worship, Jesus said, but not to bring glory to me. He did it to feel he fed on the praises of men. And every time he received applause, his heartened a little more. Each face told a story. Stories. I knew stories that resembled mine. Every sentence I heard seemed like an echo of my own justifications. I serve. God, I tithe. I don't do anything wrong. But behind those phrases, like behind the heavy curtains of a theater, hid the most silent and most powerful idol of all, the self. Pride, Jesus said, does not always present itself with arrogance. Sometimes it dresses in modesty. It disguises itself as zeal. But deep down, it always seeks one thing: to be worshipped. And there I saw it, en masse, a familiar face, mine, not as I was at that moment, but as I had been during a team meeting. I was sitting listening to a colleague talk about a spiritual problem. I nodded, offered a verse of encouragement, but inside I thought, if only she had my faith, she wouldn't be in this situation. That thought struck me like a stab. I had never confessed it. I had never even considered it a sin, but now in the light of heaven, it was poison. And Jesus continued, pride does this. It convinces you that you are okay. It gives you a false peace. It makes you say, thank you, because I am not like others. It turns you into an invisible judge. And while you judge, you condemn yourself. I knelt down even without legs. My spirit knelt because I could no longer deny that I had lived that way. I had hidden pride under verses, under church services, under the image of a good Christian. But now every excuse burned not with anger, but with truth. Jesus spoke again, but his voice was no longer just firm. It was sweet, painfully sweet. Many enter faith sincerely, but they stop growing when they begin to feel better than others. That is where pride builds its nest, not among saints who believe they are no longer so. And I wept not with tears, but with memory so. And I wept not with tears, but with memory. Every memory that surfaced, every thought never confessed, every gesture made for appearance, everything returned like a river, and I had nothing left to say in my defense. And Jesus concluded, the face of pride is the one that refuses to be saved by grace because it still believes it can save itself. I was transported again as if an invisible wind made not of air but of discernment lifted me towards a higher place. But it was not heaven, not yet. It was a gray area, more refined, more subtle, but perhaps even more deceptive than anything I had seen so far. Before me stood towering structures, not built of stones or bricks, but of books, scrolls, notes, annotated Bibles, theological commentaries. The foundations were made of quotes as the walls of arguments, and each tower had a name engraved on it, doctrine, apologetics, and I had loved them. I knew those names, and I had loved them. I approached the largest one, the Tower of Truth. A staircase of words spiraled up its side, famous phrases, sermon excerpts, conference notes. And next to the base, a man sat with his hands over his face. He wept not out of fear, but out of a pain that seemed ancient, consuming, without healing. I recognized him, Dr. Halverson. He had taught systematic theology. For 35 years, I had read his books. I had underlined his quotes. He had trained entire generations of preachers, but now he was there with his head bowed alone. Professor Halverson, I asked, even though I had no lips. He looked up, his eyes no longer held pride nor wisdom, only emptiness. I knew everything he said, but I knew no one Jesus spoke behind me. He knew every aspect of my word, but he never allowed himself to be loved by it. He loved precision, but not compassion. He defended the truth, but he did not live it. He had built a tower, not a home. I looked around. Dozens, hundreds of souls wandered through those places. Some climbed the stairs reciting verses, arguing, correcting each other another. Quoted Augustine's between Bible translations. Another still made comparisons between Bible translations, and yet they were all still. No one was truly ascending. It was an illusory climb, a perpetual motion of weightless words. A discussion caught my attention. Two men were debating fervently about the interpretation of a passage from Revelation. One said, the rapture will occur before the tribulation. The other, no, during. And so they went on in a loop. Jesus' voice grew sterner. These have made theology an arena. They have exchanged my gospel for an intellectual battlefield. Every word of theirs was a bullet, every verse a blade, but they never wept for a sinner. They never embraced the weak. Truth became their crown, but not their cross. I knelt down. I could no longer deny it. I too many times had argued to defend sound doctrine, but not out of love. How many times had I corrected someone to feel superior, not to heal them? I had mistaken the content of truth for the possession of truth, as if it were mine, as if it were metal to be displayed. And Jesus added in a gentler voice, truth without love inflates, love without truth deceives, but truth with love transforms. How many know the scriptures but do not allow themselves to be written by them? How many speak of grace but have never truly received it? One of the men arguing, noticing my presence, turned around. His eyes were red consumed. I came here to seek the truth. He said, but I didn't realize that in the meantime I had lost Jesus. Then he pointed to another building. It was low, almost hidden. There were no books, no engraved phrases, only a simple door above it, a writing, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. My spirit trembled. I had spent my life trying to understand God more than knowing him. I had studied his word like a code to be deciphered, not like a love letter. And now the towers I had admired were whitewashed tombs, beautiful but empty. Jesus concluded, many have built towers with my words, but they have never built an altar with their hearts. And the towers began to creak. The towers fell silently, no roar, no cloud of dust. They collapsed like castles of cards soaked by the truth. Only after silence reigned again, a path opened before me. It was not made of stones or earth, but of soft light. Each step was not movement, but revelation. I felt the weight of lies leaving me like clothes that were too tight. And before me, something began to shine. A valley opened up, but not like the previous one. This was not a prison, but a new garden. This was not a prison, but a new garden. Here, the trees did not have twisted roots, but deep, strong, hidden ones. The leaves did not fall, but vibrated in the passing wind. And there in the heart of that place, I saw them, the redeemed. They had no halos, no crowns. No one spoke loudly. No one showed off. They walked in simplicity. And yet every gesture, every glance, every smile was imbued with a glory that did not belong to them, but that passed through them like light, through pure glass. A woman folded a sheet on a rope. The gesture was so humble, but so full of peace that it seemed like a liturgical act. Jesus spoke to me. This woman washed clothes for the sick for 40 years without ever being noticed. Every gesture of hers was an offering. She sought no reward. She asked for no recognition, but heaven recorded every fold of her hands. An old man with a stick walked slowly through the garden. Every step seemed to guard a secret. He prayed for his community every night without anyone knowing. When he died, many thought his life had been useless, but his prayers saved lives he himself never knew. Then I saw a little boy. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but the light that surrounded him was more intense than all the collapsed towers put together. He died. Young Jesus said he was disabled, but in his silence, he loved more deeply than many preachers. His suffering was continuous worship. He never spoke, but he whispered love to me throughout his life. I walked on. I wept not with sadness, but with awareness. For the first time, I was seeing the true strength of mysteries, not toodles with thousands of followers, but the silent forgiveness of a widow, the caress given to an unnamed sick person, the renunciation made in the secret of a room. I saw a kneeling mother, her face worn by the years around her. Children played in peace. She raised 5 children in the faith Jesus said. No one ever applauded her, but every night she wrestled in prayer, and today her children lead others to me. She never stood on a pulpit, but she raised generations. And then I saw something that tore me apart, a figure myself, but transformed. Not the one I had known with an elegant jacket and underlined Bible, but a humbler, lighter Michael. He walked among the redeemed, not with confidence, but with gratitude. His gaze did not seek approval, but carried love. His hands were empty, but ready to serve, that Michael no longer wanted to be seen. He wanted to see. Jesus spoke with deep tenderness. This is the version of you that you can become if you choose the narrow path. If every day you let of siding of and let me live. If you choose the way of hiding, of forgiveness, of inner truth, this version of you is not far off. It is possible. But it requires you to die 1,000 times to pride, to vanity, to the fear of not being enough. I looked at him. No words were needed, only a yes. And I understood true salvation is not in knowing, in serving, in doing. It is in allowing oneself to be transformed, in saying, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. I can't explain how it happened, but something began to call me back, not with a voice, with an attraction like the pull of water to its source. The garden moved away, but it did not vanish. It was as if it were being etched inside me. Every face seen, every word heard, every truth revealed, did not fade away, but were planted in me like eternal seeds. Jesus looked at me. This time I saw him not as a distinct face, but as an embodied light, a gaze that held together both fire and forgiveness, no condemnation in his eyes. Only truth, only love, but a love that burns away masks, that is not satisfied with almost. Michael, he said, you have seen what many see only too late, but you have been granted to return, not because you deserve it, but so that others may hear, not to boast, but to warn. His words were not suggestions. They were fire written on the heart. Every hour Christians die convinced they are saved and wake up in the place of eternal separation, not for visible sins, but for unrecognized pride, untransformed religion, heartless prayers. I looked at him with all that I had. How can I live now? Knowing this, you will live as a lit lamp in the midst of sleep. Not everyone will listen to you. Some will mock you. But you have not been called to convince, only to tell, and whoever has ears to hear will understand. Then he showed me a scene, a hospital room. My body lying still, cold hands, closed eyes. Machines beeping faintly, a nurse checking the monitor. My sister, in a corner with the Bible on her lap, whispered, God, bring him back, please. It is time. Jesus said, but remember, Michael, this life no longer belongs to you. Do not live for the opinion of men. Do not live to prove yourself. Live for me. Announce what you have seen, and let my spirit continue what I have begun. With those words, everything dissolved, not like a dream ending, but like a curtain opening. I opened my eyes, neon light, human voices, smell of disinfectant, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, a spiritual presence that slowly retreated, but not completely. I was back. The doctors said I had been clinically dead for almost 3 minutes, but in those 3 minutes, I had lived an eternity. No one understood what had happened. Maybe a neurological reactions I needed, but I knew. And I didn't need explanations, I needed obedience. Since that day, my life has changed. Not in an aesthetic sense. I still work, I still talk to people, I still go to church. But everything is different. Before I prayed out of duty. Now I pray like someone who breathes underwater and finds an air bubble. Before I read the Bible like an expert. Now I read it trembling. Before I spoke about God. Now I listen to him. I no longer try to appear a certain way. I no longer want to be that good Christian. I want to be real. I want to be broken. I want to be transformed. And this is the message I leave you with. If you have come this far, do not trust your heart if it has not been broken and healed. Do not trust your religion if it has not produced humility. Do not trust your works if they do not spring from a love that has destroyed and rebuilt you. Jesus will not come for the best. He will come for the least, the humblest, those who've given up relying on themselves, those who tremble at his voice, those who strip themselves of all appearances. Every hour someone dies, every hour someone wakes up in eternity, and too often they realize they never truly knew him. Do not wait. Do not wait for a cardiac arrest. Do not wait. Do not wait for a cardiac arrest. Do not wait for a sign. Do not wait until it is too late. The kingdom of God is made of naked hearts, not clean hands, brothers. And sisters, if you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. This testimony is a wake-up call. Right in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know who you are, where you're standing watch, and where the Lord has allowed you to hear this message. If this touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it now. Send it to your family groups, your friends, to anyone who's drifted away from God. Do it now before the silence falls again. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, and turn on the bell, not to follow me, but to stay awake, to not miss even one more call from heaven. Time is running out, but it's not too late yet. Let's prepare together